Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. Time for another show. Time for another host, really, at this point. Quite honestly, I'm a little wiped out. Okay, well, hectic morning this morning, as usual, but all seems to be relatively under control. Of course, Greg Dworkin on his way in for a visit today. You were warned on Monday what we wouldn't be talking about on Wednesday. I may revisit it a little bit just to make a comment here or there, but we took care of business, I think, insofar as it's necessary for any radio show or podcast to do so on Monday. And, we've been talking about it ever since, so it's not like we've forgotten about these things. That's not the issue. It's just you want to be as effective as you can on a number of fronts, and I don't think any time is used that well lingering on this. There'll be plenty of discussion of it elsewhere. There's plenty of other things going on as well, of course, and not just on Twitter, which is continuing to destroy itself, which is interesting and fun to watch, but dangerous. Been holding a couple of articles about that. Some other people saying, it's more than just a spectacle, and perhaps we ought to be paying some more attention to it. Lots of other things happening today. None of them are open on my screen, though, so I can't tell you what they are. But Greg has been collecting them. And I'm sure he'll be willing to share them with you. That's the whole point, of course, of having him come on. But let's see. I have collected a number of things of course, on the Twitter front, including some weird redirections, I think, on that one. And, of course, I'm promised that we will have an update on the Too Many Heinrichs situation in Germany as well. More information still to share about that one. I even have an article or two about that. It's fascinating. That's not something that's typically on our radar here in the United States. The number of Heinrichs, of course, that means running around in Germany. But an interesting and wild story nonetheless that has weird parallels and weird origins, I think, here in the United States. So we'll catch up on those things. Word from Capitol Hill yesterday that they've reached a compromise, as everybody pretty much expected that they would, in order to keep the government running. Republicans at the moment benefit in no particular way from a government shutdown. It doesn't help them in any way. They have just had the election, so there's nothing to play off of there. No electoral advantage in their mind. I mean, they've often imagined that there was one and then found out that there wasn't. But this time they didn't even bother with that. The elections are over. The next federal elections are 2 years away. So there's nothing to be gained from screwing around with shutting down the government at this particular point. Plus, of course, I think by now the Republican leadership knows it doesn't work out particularly well for them. They are widely expected, of course, to take the reins of control in the House of Representatives. That would not reflect particularly well on them to come in with a government shutdown on their hands and then be expected to be the ones to govern and actually recover from it. I don't think that they'd be able to manage that. Democrats might have to come in and bail them out, but it wouldn't look particularly good. And also nobody's keeping track of the fact that they aren't yet in control of, they've heard on the news that Republicans won and then all of a sudden the government shuts down. They don't want those optics, right? So that's in all likelihood what happens. I think I misunderstood the date by which they had to do this work. I think I was under the impression that it was this Friday, the 16th was their deadline for fixing it, but it is in fact, does it make it next Friday? I think I just saw the date of the 22nd floating around, and I'm not going to be able to do the math offhand, but isn't the 21st? Yeah, well, today's the 14th, so the 21st is next Wednesday. I doubt they would have put the deadline on a Thursday as opposed to a Friday, although that would have been smart because they're frequently putting the deadline on Friday and then finding that they have to do last-minute work to avoid the shutdown, and that means sticking around for Friday, and they like to take off on Thursdays. So I always did wonder why they didn't make the deadline a Thursday, but now we have an answer. And I don't know, unless we're going to wrap it in tinfoil, I guess, or something like that. Anyway, Greg is here. Good morning, Greg. How you doing? What do you have lined up for us today? There's a lot.
Lots of stuff, you know,
Yes.
but one of the things is to remind everybody that whereas Mitch McConnell is like a normal Republican,
Sorta.
okay, the election's over, we got stuff to do, let's just do it and then go out and run on our accomplishments and then get reelected. Kevin McCarthy says, wait a minute,
Hold
Mitch,
on.
I oppose everything because if I don't oppose it, then I might lose the coveted Marjorie Taylor Greene vote. And I already don't have enough votes to be speaker, and Steve Scalise is measuring my drapes, and I hate this. And so, no, I'm not going along with anything.
Yeah, still no solution.
So the idea
in
that
sight for
Republicans
by the way.
or that congressional leaders understand there's no benefit in a government shutdown is
Well-
true for 3 out of 4 of them.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, I guess you could still say Kevin McCarthy understands that there isn't any. He just can't do anything about it. But he might not understand. I really don't know. He might think that that's really all the cool kids say no to everything. Why shouldn't I? Then they'll like me. You know, I don't know how much he understands versus feels like he's forced to do. But who cares? Because the outcome is the same and it's easily predictable.
So there's a great picture that headlines or tops this Politico piece.
Oh,
December spending gloom falls on GOP. I'm so disgusted is the quote. Republicans are divided over whether to land a year-end spending deal, taking it off the plate of next year's divided party and potential Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And the picture is of McCarthy addressing some reporters, some faces I recognize.
Hello. Okay.
And in the picture, McConnell must have just addressed and is finished because he's walking away. He's got his back to McCarthy. McCarthy has his back to him. And that pretty much summarizes what's going on with Republican leadership on the Hill right now.
It's like, the North going Zacks and the South going Zacks. But they've resolved their issues and are walking away. Okay.
Now, even as congressional negotiators push toward an agreement that was broadly unveiled Tuesday night, there's dissent within the GOP over whether to embrace a deal that would make things easier for Kevin McCarthy or to push for a delay into next spring when the party has more leverage under divided government. It all adds up to dwindling Republican enthusiasm for a spending agreement that's taken months to finalize.
That's right. Oh, you know, I just went to push the enthusiasm button, and the little Skype box popped up right in front of it, just at the last second. Almost hung up on you. Jeez.
Right. And while some McCarthy allies acknowledge a spending deal would ease their to-do list, few House Republicans can be counted on to support it. McCarthy himself is aligning with conservatives who want to see Congress punt, denying Democrats a win, while depositing a spending fight on the next speaker's doorstep. Summing up the party's dilemma, Kevin Cramer, senator from North Dakota, summarized, it's a very unfortunate place we find ourselves.
Yes, and not
I'm
just
so
North
disgusted
Dakota.
by the fact we're here against it, Cramer, so he's the one that's disgusted.
Oh, well, he's a disgusting fellow himself. By the way, this picture looks like they're getting ready for one of those old-fashioned duels a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, pacing off the things. So.
I'm your Huckleberry.
All right. Cool. I do like that picture. You're right.
Yeah, so it's very good there. Anyway, so here's the background to a lot of this, and here's a summary that I think well encapsulates the entire midterm.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
Well.
And it's from John Ralston, and he's talking about Nevada.
That's what
the
he does.
We Matter state, as he would point out. I've obtained, he says, some unofficial, almost complete final turnout figures in Nevada, and they are eye-opening. Permit me a thread that unfurls just how bad the GOP losses were, considering that the party's large turnout relative to Democrats. Candidates, independents, and ticket splitters mattered.
Okay. I get it.
Okay. Republican turnout, about 69%, far outdistanced Democratic turnout, about 60%. It was a 10-point GOP edge in the Democratic stronghold of Clark County.
Okay.
Mail ballots are about 50% of the total. Democrats won those pretty easily, 43-28. That's 15 points, but they won by 20% in 2020. So that was a drop-off, but still a big a big win for Democrats. So Democrats win the mail-in ballots as expected. Most of the mail margin for the Democrats was in Clark, in fact, where they won by 2-1. Thanks. Reed Machine Culinary, still doing their job. Democrats also won Washoe mail by 10,000 votes, but GOP won Election Day by a stunning 2-1 margin. The problem for them is it was only 21% of the total.
I see.
Same thing happened in Georgia, right? They clean up on Election Day, but by the time Election Day came, most of the votes are already in.
Among fewer people. They win the overwhelming majority of nobody.
Yes, and there were a lot more fewer people.
All right.
The GOP also won in-person early voting by a substantial margin. We'll see about a lot more fewer people in just a moment.
Okay.
So GOP won in-person early voting. That's where you drop it off rather than stand online to actually talk to a poll worker. But that was only about 27% of the total ballots cast. The GOP overperformed in Clark, but here's the key, relatively low rural turnout, only 12% of the total.
Oh.
And in the Washoe area, which had 63% turnout compared to Clark's 51, it killed Adam Laxalt. Consider this about Washoe. Republicans won Washoe by 7,000.
Washoe. Okay. This is like a long
That's Reno. That's the second biggest.
Yeah.
And I think, if I remember. It was like last week, so I don't remember anymore. And Laxalt lost Washoe by 8,000.
Okay.
Republicans won Washoe by 7. Laxalt lost Washoe by 8.
Wow.
So, as Vizzini might say, inconceivable.
Yeah, what?
These numbers back up what we thought. Laxalt was a terrible candidate. He was rejected by his home county voters. The people that knew him best voted against him.
Like Paul Gosar.
And Governor-elect Joe Lombardo's team did what Laxalt couldn't, appeal to independents and swing major party voters in some combination. So the Democrats held on to 3 House seats, made gains in the legislature by not just relying on turning out Democrats, but also Democrat-leaning indies. Same old Nevada story. Democrats play chess, Republicans play checkers. If Lombardo didn't have a top-tier team, he would have lost too.
Okay.
And people were still mad at Sisolak because of the hit the economy took from the pandemic. Right? And if we have time, there's a lot more to talk about that because there's some congressional reports about screw-ups in 2019. But if we knew now what we knew then, if we knew then what we know now, probably 2019 would have gone differently and not closed as much. And at the same time, hospitals were full and people were dying. So all those moves weren't bad or wrong. It's just revisionism. They go back and say so. That's true for the schools as well. But still, point is, in Nevada, there were reasons that Sisolak had headwinds and lost the governor race for the Democrats. And there's reasons Laxalt lost, partly because of Roe Dobbs, but also because he's awful. The thing is, he's a really, really, and John Ralston had said this earlier. He said this before the election. Adam Laxalt is anti-abortion in a big way, and he's well known around the state. So it was impossible after Dobbs to pivot into some sort of neutral, let's not talk about it, the will of the voter, whatever kind of position. He couldn't. Everybody knew who he was and what he stood for. And every time he tried to sound moderate, people said, you're lying. And that's one of the things that made him such a bad candidate. And of course, he didn't try to lie that much.
Well, that's nice of him.
But it was a box he couldn't get out of. And so he was a terrible candidate, and that's why he lost.
Put him in a box.
His
own box.
In Georgia, Herschel Walker lost because there were a handful of Republicans who refused to vote for him.
Yes.
In Nevada, Adam Laxalt lost because there were a lot more Republican voters who knew him a lot better who refused to vote for him. So congratulations, Republicans, on recruiting the best candidates to possibly lose.
Yes, and there was a guy who was more or less, well, he certainly considered himself personally responsible for having recruited all those candidates, and that guy is Orange.
Yeah, and we'll get to the Orange guy in a moment because there's a lot to say about him, both now and after the break, when we're going to delve into the Total Point Memo, Mark Meadows text stories.
Okay.
But let's start with this one. This is what I led off with the pundit roundup this morning. This is by Terry Canefield.
Yes.
A writer who writes about all sorts of stuff. She's very good. And this is on her own website. So it's not Substack. It's not Medium.
Terry Canfield I don't know. What is her website?
Com.
Oh, okay.
TerryCanefield.com.
It might be EDU. Who knows? She's very professorial, perhaps.
She is very professorial, but she's also very accessible. So last week, Trump expressed solidarity with the insurrectionists and had dinner with two fans of Adolf Hitler. On Sunday, December 4th, he announced that the Constitution should be terminated so he could be reinstated as president. On Tuesday, the Trump Organization was convicted on all counts of tax fraud.
Yeah, good.
And the Republican leadership remained largely silent. One reader on Post News said, I want to understand how these voters rationalize this. Is it simply pure greed? How is dismantling the very foundation that helped make them wealthy and powerful a smart idea? I wonder if it would take what it would take to get this powerful club to take a step back and try to be grateful for what they do have rather than wanting more greatness. Would they then maybe reevaluate their voting choices? And the answer that Terry gives is no. They're mostly in agreement with Trump's goals, and they don't really care if he breaks laws.
Yeah.
They don't think democracy is working any longer, so they reject laws and norms that underlie democracy. So a good definition of democracy, and this is why you can't try to persuade Trump voters. There's no common ground here to discuss anything. A good definition, she writes, of democracy comes from sociologist Max Weber, who says there's three sources of authority for government: the rule of law, which is the authority that underlies democracy. That's our thing. That's why we always cite rule of law. It's good rule of law. Research is out. Rule of law is important, et cetera, et cetera. We say that all the time.
Yeah.
Second, traditional, the authority that underlies monarchies. This is where Heinrich the 13th is coming from.
Sort of. He was never even in line for that, but, you know.
Well, he is in line. He's like 17th.
7,000th, as I didn't read it, but okay.
And personal rule, the authority that underlies fascism. And if you don't like democracy, there are not many alternatives. So you have the fascists, the people that Trump had dinner with. You have the monarchists like Heinrich. And you have the rule of law, which is the Democrats.
There are probably more forms out there, but these are the ones we're familiar with.
And they, there are fringe parties, but these are the main political parties.
Yeah.
So political scientist Karen Stenner explains it this way: as liberal democracy expands and includes more people, it becomes more diverse and complicated, and the growing diversity and complexity trigger authoritarian reactions in people who are averse to complexity and can't tolerate diversity. Think of the rurals. So the point there is we're never going to be free of Trumpism, ever. Because the very fact that the United States becomes more diverse and complex means it's going to trigger authoritarian reaction. So the point is always to contain it, control it, outvote it.
Yes, all right.
And that's what we've done mostly. And the control part is seen by things like, as bad as he was, William F. Buckley kicking out the John Birchers. It can happen, and it can happen from within the Republican Party or the conservatives.
Yes. Okay. All right. They just have to have a will of their own.
This is how the American New Radical Right explains its goals. In April 2009, billionaire Peter Thiel announced that he no longer believes that freedom and democracy are compatible.
I mean,
they're just outright. They don't do the quiet part.
Yeah.
They just say it out loud. Specifically,
he announced
said
that he no longer
the 1920s were the last decade in American history during which one could be genuinely optimistic about politics.
I guess.
And since 1920, the vast increase in welfare beneficiaries and the extension of the franchise to women have rendered the notion of capitalist democracy into an oxymoron. He really is upset about the income tax.
I guess, although he never mentions it.
That's the main thing that happened then. That's what ended the, when you go visit the Vanderbilt mansion and you get your tour. Why do these mansions exist and why don't they exist anymore? The income tax.
Yes. So for Mr. Forthright, who says everything else is to blame but won't actually name the culprit that makes him mad, that's a pretty interesting.
Right. So to recap familiar territory, the 1920s did indeed mark the end of an era. Before Roosevelt's New Deal, which I'm really fond of, and that was in the 1930s, the U.S. was in what Heather Cox Richardson, historian, calls our second oligarchy. The first was the era of slavery, and this is the second. All wealth and power were concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy and powerful white men, Commodore Vanderbilt and the
other dudes.
Coopers, the Hewitts, there are families that you could think, the Astors, who are old wealth.
Sure.
The lodges.
Yes. Cabots.
The Cabots.
And the Cabot lodges.
Yeah. The lodges only speak to the Cabots, and the Cabots only speak to God, as they used to say in Boston.
Right. God.
So the era that Peter Thiel wants to return to is called a patriarchy, and goes on to point out that one of the reasons that their support for Trumpism is that there's a good chunk of the population that simply doesn't believe in rule of law. That's really the bottom line there. So this is from the memo, The Hill, today. New controversies deepen GOP's extremist problem. And this is background for why some Republicans couldn't find themselves voting for an Adam Laxalt supported by a Donald Trump. A string of new controversies isn't doing anything to soften these edges. Marjorie Taylor Greene told a gala in New York that the January 6th insurrection would have been more successful had she and former Trump strategist Steve Bannon organized it.
They did.
Well, they would have grifted more, but I don't know that it would have been more successful. True. Expanding on her point, the Georgia congresswoman said such an attempt would have been armed.
Yes, of course. Everything.
She later claimed she was being sarcastic.
Being on the playground would be armed.
She would sarcastically shoot people.
Yes, right. Well, yeah, isn't this fun? Pow. I was being sarcastic.
The bizarre claim came at a time when Republicans were still being buffeted by outrage over former President Trump having dinner at Mar-a-Lago with two noted anti-Semites, Ye, the artist formerly known as Kanye West, and Nick Fuentes. And again, we said at the time on the show, and we'll say again, no, it's not LOL, nothing matters. That really mattered a lot. And there's still backlash over that. And then on Monday, website Talking Points Memo started to publish what are now 7 articles.
Yes, I know. I'm way behind. I've only done
that
2.
were apparently sent to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, texts in the waning days of Trump's presidency. These messages included one from Representative Ralph Norman from South Carolina, who sent 3 days prior to President Biden's inauguration, in which the congressman urged Meadows to encourage Trump to impose martial law.
Right, to save the republic.
Our last hope in saving our republic. But altogether, it's a lot of new fuel for the fire that burnt the GOP in the midterms.
Yes, well, you can't save republics with martial law, but it's also just a dumb thing to ask for.
So John Lamar was on Morning Joe this morning, and he pointed out a couple of things. Currently, Trump's political position sucks. There are polls we'll get to. Disastrous rollout of his reelection campaign right before the Republicans got skunked in the midterms when Trump was expecting the opposite. He expected to ride the wave, and it turns out he fell into the trough. He's quite dumb. And that didn't work. His drop in the polls is a sense he can't win, far more than rejection of Trumpism, as we were just talking about with Terry Canfield. The idea that Republicans would start to reject Trump, which is what the polls say, isn't because they've rejected Trumpism and they want to go back to the rule of law. It's that we reject the law, but we don't think Trump could pull it off.
That is true. I mean, we should be reminded that the logical conclusion of what we see in the data doesn't really make any sense to draw, since the whole point of Trumpism is that logic doesn't make any sense. They might,
that's true.
And they could decide
here's
they like Trump
thing
again.
You could infer from the data, which may or may not be true. Right. I see DeSantis rising. You might think that makes DeSantis a stronger candidate. I don't necessarily think so.
Oh.
I think he's overrated because Trumpsters are seeking a safe harbor. So they rejected Trump, and they look at the name they know.
A stalking horse Trump candidate. Yeah, that could be.
I mean, absolutely. But when you get to know DeSantis, you hate him because he's really an awful person.
He is. That's true.
His so-called record. I mean, right now he's running on trying to criminalize anybody who gives COVID vaccines in Florida.
Yes.
Which is something he should investigate because he really advocated for that.
Yeah.
And now he and Trump are arguing over whether vaccines are good or not. Trump invented them, so they're good. And so, he's going to take a lot of hits on that. It's just one of the many reasons why I think DeSantis is a bit overrated. But right now, he's peaking. And I think he's going to be a classic peaks too early, which is what stalking horses do.
Oh.
But we'll see.
I guess they stalk, and then they peak too early. That's the
And
second.
then, so here's the poll from today that everybody's talking about.
Sure, we are.
Which is from a couple of days ago, but there's follow-up.
Oh.
This is on the 13th, so it's yesterday. Trump in trouble. Republican support for his 2024 bid falls amid political and legal setbacks. We haven't even gotten to the fact that the special prosecutor's honing in on subpoenaing Brad Raffensperger and anybody associated with the Georgia fake electors, and the Arizona fake electors, and the Pennsylvania fake electors.
You can't
and
do
so
that.
I think he's going to be indicted on that.
I hope so. I mean,
Not
I hope
just
for all
Mar-a-Lago
sorts of
stealing
indictments.
confidential information from the United States government, which is to say taxpayers.
Yeah. Same office handling both investigations, so, once
Yeah,
they start
Mar-a-Lago's easy,
indicting
and
them,
this
what
one's
the
more
hell?
difficult. But hey, they pulled off the prosecution of seditious conspiracy with the Oath Keepers, so they're capable. Anyway, Republican support for Donald Trump's presidential bid has, and here's the quote from USA Today, cratered.
Cratered. Okay.
An exclusive USA Today Suffolk University poll finds as the former president is beleaguered by midterm losses and courtroom setbacks. By 2 to 1, GOP and GOP-leaning voters now say they want Trump's policies but a different standard bearer, just bearing out what we were saying. While 31% want the former president to run, 61% prefer somebody else. They have a name in mind, Ron DeSantis. By double digits, 56 to 33, they prefer DeSantis over Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Republicans and conservative independents increasingly want Trumpism without Trump, said David Paleologos, director of the Suffolk University Political Research Center. He's famous because he stopped polling right before the Romney-Obama election, saying Romney has this. No reason to poll the last few days.
Figures.
And, of course, blew that one. But those are pretty big numbers. Biden 47, Trump 40 in this poll. Among Republican voters, DeSantis 56-33. Trump's rating with Republicans, 64 favorable, 23 unfavorable. He was running at 90. That is a big drop.
Okay, I like the idea. Trumpism without the Trump. Okay, I mean, whatever. But, it reminds me of the David Duke without the baggage thing. There's a lot of withouts that the Republicans need to get rid of, apparently.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Guten Tag. Welcome back to the Heinrich in the Morning Show here on Heinrich Roots Radio. I'm hinting at this. I'm pushing strongly for this radio. I know that might not be next on the agenda, though. But
it's next on the agenda.
Is it?
I have
Okay.
to do it. It's just such a great story. This is from the New York Times, and it's titled "The Prince, the Plot, and a Long Lost Reich." Prince Heinrich the 13th was arrested last week as a suspected ringleader of a plan to overthrow the German government. You know, he was more of a puppet than a ringleader, but whatever.
Okay.
Nostalgic for an imperial past, he embraced far-right conspiracy theories. And even to set the stage, this is the New York Times blurb about the two authors of the piece, Erica Solomon and Katrin Benholt. Erica Solomon traveled to Bad Lobenstein, a spa town about 3 hours south of Berlin, to report this story. And Katrin Benholt, who's written extensively on the far right in Germany, reported from Berlin. Mm-hmm. So they're in Germany. They're on location.
Yeah, on the ground in Germany. Send ideas.
And they talk about the hunting lodge where a lot of this plotting took place, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Is
so
this
What is crenellated?
What? Crenellate?
It's parapets. It's molding in the matter of a battlement. And so, I look at crenellated and I'm thinking folded up. But no, it's just that it has all these angles on it because of the battlements. The crenellated hunting lodge of Prince Heinrich XIII of Reuss sits atop a steep hill looking out over homes laced with snow and Christmas lights in Bad Lobenstein.
Not good Lobenstein, the other one.
You know, it's one of those Christmas globes you shake in the snow and all that sort of stuff. Popular with the local mayor and many nearby villagers, the prince spent his weekends in the spa town giving an aristocratic flair to this sleepy corner of rural eastern Germany. Of course, it would have to be East Germany.
Eastern. Right.
But there's a darker side. Heinrich XIII, prosecutors and intelligence officials say, also used his lodge to host meetings where he and a band of far-right co-conspirators plotted to overthrow the German government and execute the chancellor. If he did it Trump style, he would have charged everybody for coming so he could pay for the heat.
Right.
Those things are a bear to heat in the winter, you know. In the basement, the group stored weapons and explosives, and in the forest that sloped beneath the lodge, they held target practice.
The weapons were like flails and morning stars and stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Last week, the lodge, a 3-hour drive south of Berlin in the state of Thuringia, was one of 150 targets raided by security forces and one of post-war Germany's biggest counter-terrorist operations. And by Friday, 23 members of the cell had been detained across 11 German states. They discovered troves of arms, military equipment, as well as a list of 18 politicians and journalists deemed to be enemies.
Journalists, wow.
One of the many, many, many reasons why you have to take this stuff seriously. Then the Times has a picture of the prince being arrested, and I'm sending it to you because it illustrates his
the frog marching
what's his
prince.
name? Jeff Van whatever his name is, the Democrat turned Republican congressman.
Oh yeah, right. What is his name? Jeff
His fashion
Van...
style.
That's
why I'm illustrating it. That's why the comment was made. I hope his coat of arms is more attractive than his sport coat.
Yeah,
he's wearing a green sport coat with red.
I don't know what to say.
Checks boxes on it.
It's like the Tron set.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's got a little scarf tucked into his a cravat tucked into his shirt. Orange pants. You know, very, very stylish.
Yeah, for I don't know when or where that were blue. So like a deep blue shirt and a greenish jacket with orange stripes and sort of a rust, maybe corduroy pants and a floral cravat.
And the cravat. Don't forget the cravat.
Yes.
And of course he's wearing a mask, which is good.
Oh yeah, kudos to him.
Yeah, kudos to him.
And he's being arrested at his home, which is number 14, ironically. He's Heinrich XIII. Where does he live? Number 14.
So they talked to the locals, and the locals sort of got the idea that something was up because they sort of kept getting these notices about local election to determine who's in charge when, in fact, there were no elections.
Oh, what? Okay.
Right. So they some of the locals would allow them to give lectures about, how these things are terrible and that we really ought to go back to the way things were. It's not clear when he was radicalized, but in a speech, Prince Heinrich XIII said, ever since Germany surrendered on the 8th of May, Germany's never been sovereign again. It was made into an administrative structure of the Allies in the so-called United Economy Entity, Federal Republic of Germany, in other words, a commercial structure. So he refers to the current government of Germany, the current constitutional, democratically elected government of Germany, as a business entity.
Sure, why not?
And everybody works for the Allies. That's the construct that they have in their mind.
Well, was that or Twitter?
And, that speech and others started to alienate him from the rest of the House of Reuss, as if, he shouldn't have been alienated already.
Yeah, just from
and
his
so
clothes.
the whole idea here of this,
prince.
we don't, they are really akin to sovereign citizens, certainly rings true, because when you read what they stand for.
That's helpful, yes.
And when you listen to their speeches, that's exactly the sort of thing that brought us, the standoffs in the West over water rights and cattle feeds.
Mm-hmm. It's
that
the same
government has no right to
weird
tell us what to
philosophy.
do.
Or that the government isn't really a government. It's some kind of crazy
Well, then
concoction.
it progresses from
who
there.
knows what? Yeah, it's very similar. I think that's a great analogy. It might even be just directly stolen from the sovereign citizen movement.
Yeah, exactly right. So, it goes back and forth, so it's really hard to know.
All right. Our guys dress better, I think. Slightly. I mean, camo. That's no great shakes, but
But we don't have the same kind of crenellated battlements they have in
That's true.
Eastern Germany.
I notice he's not being arrested at any crenulated anything. That just looks like a regular, a huge house, but a regular one.
Right.
But okay.
Anyway, so I thought
word.
that was just, if you got more to contribute to that later
Sure.
or now, that's great. I just thought it was all pretty interesting.
Yes. The whole plot, by the way, should have been called the Heinrich maneuver. I don't know why they didn't do that.
Exactly.
Damn.
Well, actually, you could have called it Ocean's 13.
True. Or 13th, anyway, I guess. X111, XIII.
Right, exactly.
I have to figure out how you say 13th in German. Someone probably knows offhand. Germans.
I expect a lot of people know.
Yes, right.
Most of whom don't
Like
approve of
millions.
what he did.
That's true. Some of them are the 14th, and the spokesman was the 14th that doesn't like him.
Anyway, so there's
Amazing
that.
story. Okay.
Then there's this remarkable work that Talking Points memo did. Hunter Walker,
Yes.
who
Very busy.
lately is writing for them, has always been a great investigative reporter. I've known him on Twitter for years and years and years. And he's got his own website, and he talks about interesting things, and he's often talked about the underbelly of the right-wing movements. And here he's writing about the fact that Talking Points memo obtained, I don't know if it's exclusive, might be, all of the texts that Meadows had sent and received from allies around January 6th that went to the January 6th committee.
Yes, that's the important caveat.
And
there
so
may be
they've
more.
seen these things. And so next week or this week or whenever they do it, and whenever they get around to it, I think it's next week,
There's not much
talking
time.
about which referrals to Department of Justice and other places like ethics are going to come from the committee, will be looking for names. Because there are a lot of names in this thing. For example, Hunter Walker
Not that name.
tooted
He's a
on
reporter.
Mastodon. Mark Meadows to an ally in Georgia
did
the
what?
day before the race was called for Biden, quote, "No one should be asking you to stand down," end quote. And that's from his piece about what happened in Georgia. And Kevin Cruz sums up this. So this week we've learned Representative Gosar backed Trump's call to terminate the Constitution to keep him in office. Representative Green said that if she'd led the January 6th coup, they would have been armed and won. And Representative Norman urged Trump to declare martial law to do so after January 6th failed. We talked about that stuff. Tom Nichols, Radio Free Tom,
Bates.
ever Trumper, conservative, says, don't shrug this off. A member of the Congress of the United States wanted the outgoing president to invoke martial law and use the arms of the United States military to prevent the new president from taking office. And Tom Nichols has a word for it. It's called sedition.
Yes.
And if you think sedition is, one of those things you read about in textbooks, but, somebody was just convicted for seditious conspiracy.
And I have some great historical pictures of how in the olden days, as Trump was harkening back to, how we dealt with those seditious conspirators. And there's rope in the picture.
Right. And Kevin Cruz says, these are members of the House Republican caucus who will swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Hopefully their GOP colleagues will be able to keep a straight face as they lie about that oath. Hey, GOP leader, that would be Kevin McCarthy, the one who probably won't be speaker. When you open the House by reading the full Constitution, can you have Gosar, Green, or Norman read this part, the 14th Amendment, citizenship, equal protection, and other rights of citizens? Section 3, disqualification from holding office. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or any other state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. You can serve if Congress removes that.
They did do that thing.
By 2/3 of each house.
Right, which is an insurmountable number. They won't get that. But it has to happen to them first, and then it can be undone. But nobody knows how to make it happen in the first instance. They forgot to write that part of the law. So,
and as people point out, you were incredibly kind to not point out that Representative Norman wrote it as Marshall law.
Yes, that is true. We didn't need to.
We didn't need to, but that's the least of it, because that would make light of something that's actually rather serious. You can't convict me. I said Marshall.
Yeah, that's wrong. That's a way to get out of it. Maybe that would work.
Yeah,
I'm sure they think of it that way. Like sovereign citizens.
Clip, not magazine. So
right. So you can't convict me. It is pretty incredible. We read a bunch of these things yesterday. I think I read through two of there were only four, I think, at the time. And now he's added three more. And I don't know.
Did you do Georgia?
I don't know.
Inside Team Trump's chaotic attempts to overturn the 2020 vote in Georgia?
No, I don't think we got to the Georgia one yet. We'll do that one today if that's good.
Well, there's that one's absolutely worth going over.
That might be
just from the article. Dick Morris, the former Bill Clinton strategist turned conservative pundit, had appeared on far-right cable channel Newsmax, touting a plan to have Republican state legislatures take over the counting process.
I heard about Morris. Yeah, go on.
Dick Morris. Remember Dick Morris?
I do. Too well.
Yeah. Mark Green, Representative Tennessee, Republican, one of 34 members of the Congress who messaged Meadows about overturning the vote. 34 members of Congress.
Yeah.
Let that sink in, as they like to say, as the kids say. Had sent Meadows a text highlighting Morris's strategy. That evening, Meadows wrote Georgia State Senator Marty Harbin and urged him to contact Morris to put the wheels in motion. And the text was one of 2,319 that Meadows turned over to the House Select Committee. And remember, he held back others.
Yes. This is the full trove of what the committee has, but the committee will tell you, we don't know if we have everything. We don't have most of, we don't know if Meadows answered a lot of these texts, and if he did, what did they say?
It's like asserting that we have everything that Donald Trump stole that was confidential. We don't know that. We know what we have. We don't know what we don't have.
He keeps saying he gave everything, and then we keep searching places and finding that he didn't turn everything over. So
Georgia was a major focus.
Yes, okay.
And the majority of the message being published here for the first time reveal in new detail how the Georgia push collided with Senate runoff campaigns. Because you had Perdue and Loeffler running.
Right. Okay.
And they're fighting to keep their seats at the same time Trump was working to reverse his loss.
Yes.
So the runoff elections were on January 5th.
I do recall that being the case.
And then January 6th, of course, the day after. Then that confluence left Georgia's Republican senators struggling to maintain Trump's favor by proving their devotion, but also trying to get themselves reelected.
Yeah, that created real problems for them and lost them the seats. And nobody gave any thought to that. Or if they did, it didn't matter because Trump was saying, the thought you need to be having is about me, not them. And then he lost the Senate for you. Ha-ha.
Right. So Donald Trump Jr. outlines what the plan was in one of these texts. It's very simple. If through our lawsuits and recounts, the Secretary of State on each state cannot certify states voted, the state assemblies can step in and vote and put forward the electoral slate Republicans control, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, etc. We get Trump electors. Safe harbor on 8 December. If for whatever reason you miss the electors, then cannot meet in the individual states. So we either have a vote we control and we win, or it gets kicked to Congress January 6th, and the House meets to vote by state party delegation. So, and then he goes through the states and how they could still win. And Meadows responded to the message the following day. He suggested the White House was pursuing some version of this in Georgia. Much of this has merit. Working on this for Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina already, he wrote. Don Jr.'s message and the Meadows' reply was first reported in The Breach, the untold story of the investigation into January 6th. Don Jr. did not respond to a request for comment. So they basically have it on record that they were plotting.
Yes.
And that's why it's going to be so interesting in terms of Department of Justice subpoena power, which is much greater than this January 6th committee, and what the grand jury is doing in terms of Georgia and the fake elector scheme, and are you running as a fake elector knowing that you lost, and so on and so forth. So a lot more to come from this in detail. But the idea that, remember at the time people were saying this is awful the day after, and then like 2 days later, well, the whole thing's overblown. They're a bunch of tourists. They weren't really planning anything. They weren't that violent.
Yeah, I'm not dead. So.
Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, oh, yeah, we were. And in fact, if we were charged, we would have been a lot more violent. How is that helping your court cases?
Man, no idea.
So then texts come out from Mark Meadows saying he was right in the middle of it. And sure, Trump may well be indicted over this because he was the one on the phone. And this article goes on to say that there were especially Brad Raffensperger's aides frantically tweeting to Mark Meadows and Mark Meadow aides,
but tweeting,
stop this phone call. This is awful. It's not going right. Get him off the phone.
Were they tweeting rather than texting him directly?
They were texting.
That makes a difference. Okay, so they're texting him, please stop. Okay, that's amazing. But sometimes you're distracted. You're on the phone. You're trying to pay attention to what the boss has to say. You don't see what's coming out of your text.
Raffensperger couldn't do it, and he didn't want to say openly. He knows the call's being recorded.
Right?
So he says he's frantically signaling to his aides, he's writing on a piece of paper, tell him to stop. I can't tell him to stop.
You can, though. I mean, you just say, I got to tell you, you're straying into illegal territory, and I know this is going to make you mad, but I have been recording from the beginning.
So here's how that call goes. So what are we doing here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes, fellas. I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break. Raffensperger debunked various conspiracies and told the former president the data you have is wrong, repeatedly rejected Trump's request to change the results. We have to stand by our numbers. We believe our numbers are right. Along with showing Meadows and this aide, Jordan Fuchs, arranging the conversation, the text logs show what was happening in real time behind the scenes. Fuchs is pleading with Meadows to get Trump to hang up. We need to end this call. I don't think this will be productive much longer.
Why didn't you just say you were going into a tunnel?
Fuchs says, let's save the relationship. Thank you. Wow.
That's interesting. That's worth noting. Again, let's save the relationship, because even the big hero, Brad Raffensperger, is saying, essentially, how can I extract myself from this situation without losing Trump's support? Because if Trump turns against me, right, I'll lose my next election. And Trump turned against you anyway. He's sitting there imagining, well, if I know he fantasizes about my whatever finding 11,000 votes is supposed to mean, but that's not going to happen. And there's a million reasons why, and he'll realize that, and then he won't hate me for that. I just have to make sure he doesn't hate me for hanging up the phone on him. But no, he's going to hate you for not finding.
Yeah.
So just hang up.
There's other texts showing that the runoff is approaching, and Trump advisor Jason Miller is looking at requests from people like Perdue and Loeffler to, rally or send robocalls on their behalf with his voice and so on and so forth. And Miller says, I don't know if we can do this. These guys aren't on board.
That's interesting.
They have to get on board with the Cruz effort. That was seemingly a reference to a move spearheaded by Ted Cruz, one of your more likable senators, to have senators object to the election results. Cruz had texted Meadows about the plan. So Cruz is an insurrectionist as well, just for the record. Based on his conversations with their campaign teams, Miller feared Perdue and Loeffler were not willing to join the effort.
Okay. Well, they weren't even sure they would be
basically,
there.
that sets the stage for Georgia. And the idea that Trump, therefore, wasn't part and parcel and key to those elections, which Ossoff and Reverend Warnock won, and these elections, which is to say Reverend Warnock won again, of course Trump was on the ballot. He had to be on the ballot.
He was forcing his way onto the ballot.
Yeah, even if he didn't show up in person, even if he said, I'm going to be quiet about this, he was on the ballot.
I want you to find a way to put me on the ballot. And that's one of the many
reasons why his premature launch of his presidential campaign was such a disaster for him in Georgia with this most recent Senate election. I mean, when Republicans are looking at Trump and thinking, I don't know about this guy, it's not that I don't like his words, but he's a loser.
Yeah.
Lost his own election. He lost Georgia. I can't even count the number of times he lost Georgia for us. There's his own election he lost. There's Ossoff and Warnock 1 that he lost. Then he lost Warnock 2. The guy's a loser. Of course I'm going to think about DeSantis.
Yeah, I guess so. And if you're counting all the runoffs, there's another 2 in there.
Yeah. So, for each one of those. So it's a bizarre situation where, and I said on the show last week, or maybe even before that, I think Trump is a spent political force. Trumpism isn't, but Trump is. And so now you have backup from events, which is to say elections, and you have backup from polls. And as Simon Rosenberg is fond of saying, don't just look at the polls, look at those special election results.
Yeah. Well, it's a good call, I think. I know it's hard to imagine because, various
so
reasons,
ubiquitous and you're sick of seeing him and so on and so forth.
Right,
but you know what? It's a force that is losing steam, and so says Suffolk University and USA Today.
And you know what happens whatever happens at Suffolk University, everybody's talking about. But there, I give a good point here, and you'll have help in it. Anybody who wants to run for president as a Republican who isn't Trump is going to have a vested interest in carrying that theme forward, that he's a spent political force. Because if he isn't, then they'll nominate him instead of me. And so that's going to be the major theme of at least a good part of my election, or at least what I whisper into the ears of the muckety-mucks who talk to the newspapers later on. Everybody's going to have to start saying he's a spent force if any one of the 50,000 other Republicans who are entertaining running for president, and there's more every day because of how uncertain it is that Trump can recapture the nomination. You even have Asa Hutchinson saying, I'm going to run. Who's that? He's the outgoing governor of Arkansas. And, why him? I don't know. But anybody who entertains ideas like that has got to carry that ball forward. You want me because Trump is a spent force. Otherwise, it's just useless for me to run for president. So I think you'll have a lot of help in that. So you're early adopter, and you're not even running for president as a Republican. That's crazy. You should think about that. You might as well do it.
So in the last few minutes, in their overall collection page.
Yes.
Right, the splash page that you can get to all the different Meadows text things that they published so far. They also have a brief collection of individuals in Congress, like Jim Jordan, for example, or Scott Perry.
Yeah,
and the one I selected is Andy Biggs because it's about Arizona. So it's a selection of key texts between Biggs and Mark Meadows, starting on November 3rd. The first hour voting trend, Republicans voting at 3 times the Democrats, says Andy Biggs. As we learned from Maricopa and Nevada, you can know who votes, but you can't know who they voted for.
Yes.
So that's why early voting and, counting turnout is always tricky. You can interpret it in terms of, this is record compared to, but who did they vote for? We have to wait to count the votes before we find that out. So later in the day, Biggs writes Meadows, this is the latest. We've expanded our leader Democrats to well over our lead over, what he writes is our leader Democrats to well over 30,000 votes. I called my consultants and they tell me the independents are probably breaking better than 2 or 3% for Trump because they're so active today. So basically, it's a good reminder that when places like Politico and Axios and Punchbowl talk to the insiders, they don't know anything more than we do.
That could certainly be the case. Consider how many insiders there are who say things like, what's great for the Republic is a suspension of the Constitution. Well,
right, or that nobody really cares about Dobbs.
Right. So
that's my favorite.
Insiders are frequently dumb. They are frequently underinformed, but they are insiders, and so they know that people will listen to them, and they take advantage of that and say dumb or wrong things that they know are dumb or wrong, but that play to their advantage, and hope the other insiders are too embarrassed to admit that they don't know that the other person is full of it.
Right. So by that night, they realized that all that stuff was crap, and they lost. Fox called it. So the next big text that they pulled out was Fox called it, but this is the situation that's been reported to me. There are 700,000 outstanding ballots statewide. They're dropped off in day of votes. Fox doesn't know what they're doing. There are too many votes. There's at least one more report tonight. They're going to start counting in Maricopa. They'll only release one report at the end of the day. We're now familiar with this process. whatever happens, nobody can concede because the president is going to win this state. After you and I talked, another 10,000 votes came for the president. So please make sure nobody in the campaign or press office says anything about conceding in Arizona.
Sure. All you have to do is control everything that the Trump team says.
Right. By the next day,
yeah,
still about 340,000 Maricopa County ballots. And Meadows says, okay, but that's not enough to help us get out there.
That's very sensible.
And Biggs is arguing, no, it is. Because he won by 59% of the 75,000 today. He needs to win by 56. He can do this. And Meadows says, okay, well, we'll keep hope. Mm-hmm. And Biggs is talking about the legal team and what they could do. And goes on to say that I'm sure you heard of the proposal. It's to encourage the state legislators to appoint a locked door in the various states where there's been shenanigans. If I understand right, most of these states have Republican legislatures. It seems to be comporting with glorified Bush as well as the Constitution. They're talking about Bush v. Gore, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. As well, highly controversial. It can't be much more controversial than the lunacy we're sitting out there now. And it'd be pretty difficult because he would take governors and legislators with collective will and backbone to do that. Is anybody on the team researching and lobbying this? And Meadows says, oh, I love it. Please don't let the president concede. We have to exhaust all the options. The president asked me to call Ducey. I did, and Ducey won't talk to me.
Yeah.
He'll only let me talk to his chief of staff, but based on hints that were given to me, looks like the governor wants to punch this to county board supervisors.
Yeah, like it's supposed to.
Then now they're down to 60,000 ballots. And can you get me, says Meadows, can you get me the Attorney General of Arizona phone number?
No.
Then they talk about whatever remedy is left. And then finally on 11/22, Biggs says, don't hold that false hope on that, but there's a glimmer potentially there, but we shouldn't get overhyped.
Oh, really?
Circus is coming down tomorrow, and I wanted your input. Giuliani and the company will be in downtown Phoenix. I'm planning on being there. Anything I should look out for when I speak to the crowd. That was the last text that they posted. Yeah. So you get an idea that Biggs really isn't interested in the actual vote.
No.
He's just interested in the mechanism of how we can win. And that summarizes the entire effort from Republicans, insiders, and the insurrectionists. That's their mindset. That's what they were concerned about. At no point did they say, gee, maybe we lost because more people voted for the other guy. That was never part of the analysis. Never.
Right. Well, you know, all they were interested in is technically, can we force someone to put this name on this paper as the winner instead? Yeah, we can. Doesn't mean anything, but all right, well, let's force it. Ink on paper, that's good.
Exactly. All right. More tomorrow. Yeah. And you got more stuff you could do. There's a lot more material just from this alone, and I'll see you on Thursday.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So there's a million different directions we can go, of course, or one of the two directions that we were previously going that might be even more interesting. I want to throw in this thing because I'm not done with Heinrichs. How about that? I've been holding on to this piece from Foreign Policy magazine, and of course, this is a foreign issue. So why not take a look at it? And it's about the Heinrichs, and I thought it added a little extra interesting context. And after all, Foreign Policy magazine, where else would you go for a rundown on foreign types of policy? What better fit could there be? Anyway, I thought this had an interesting angle to it. And it is the headline here, the title is Germany's conspiracists borrow American ideas to plot against the state. So this article posits that they were in fact stealing, from perhaps the sovereign citizens. That's why there's so much similarity here. But the stealing American ideas to plot against the state. So it's not even German in origin. I don't think that they care about that. And of course, if they say it to one another in German, that's as German as it needs to be for a bunch of crazy people. The Reichsbürger movement is a motley array of nostalgic failures, is the subheader. The writer here, Lucian, we're talking about, remember, is foreign policy, so foreign name, I imagine. Lucian Staiano Daniels. Daniels is not a terribly difficult name to pronounce. He is credited here as a scholar of the 17th century military history, which I guess is the last time that the Reusches were super important in Germany. And so he, I guess, knows the family history. Now, this piece is illustrated with a photo of the hunting lodge. And of course, I guess we should also point out that these hunting lodges are, well, as, what was the word that you used for it? I can't even remember already. It sounded like, crunchy and, full of nougat or something like that. Anyway, yeah, it is, it's a little castle, more castle looking than hunting lodge looking, but I guess, what can you do? These German lodges, they had a long time to, keep adding to these things. They're not log cabins like there would be in America, but here, a view of the actual hunting lodge, and this one made me do a double take because the name of the hunting lodge, we haven't discussed that. It's not as bad as, say, crenellated. Thanks. Mom texts me. Production assistant in one of my remote locations texts, crenellated. Right. That makes me think like, it's funny that Greg was saying it made me think like that meant something, but it meant something different. Crenellated puts me in mind of, I'm thinking of like, what's the, phrenology is what I'm thinking of. Like people are trying to feel the shape of someone's skull. Oh, it's crenellated, cause there's that, I was like cranium, I don't know, it feels like it's in there, but it's not. Anyway, crenellated. That means all crazy on the top like a castle, I think is essentially what that's supposed to mean. So I've done a double take at the name of this place, and I was going to say it's not as bad as Rick Perry has a ranch, right? And that had a wacky name. Anyway, this is a different kind of wacky name. Made me look twice. Now, the actual name of it is Weidmannsheil. Weidmannsheil Hunting Lodge, which, as it turns out, is German, well, really Austrian, as it turns out, Austrian-German hunter's greeting. So in other words, he's got a hunter's lodge and he named it Good Hunting. Like, that's the thing, Weidmannsheil is like the greeting that hunters give to one another when they run into one another in Austria, anyway. Wasn't entirely clear how widely used it is in Germany proper, but what is Germany proper anyway? Who knows? The 17th century military history people will tell you it could mean anything. Anyway, it made me look again because, of course, the I, it's Waidmann, which in print looks an awful lot too quickly like WALD, lowercase l, WALDMAN, with an extra N, and a Heil on the end, like Heil as in Hitler, I suppose. But you can Heil anything. It doesn't have to be related to Hitler. And there you go. Hail, fellow well met, Mr. Hunter. Weidmannsheil. So that's the name of the hunting lodge. I think that's interesting all by itself. What are you calling your hunting lodge? Hunting lodge, basically, is what we're talking about here. So this is it. Here's the story, the way they did it in foreign policy. On December 7th, that was Pearl Harbor Day. The day will now live in infamy in Germany as well. On December 7th, authorities across Germany arrested at least 25 people in connection to a conspiracy to storm the Bundestag, right? They say that Bundestag like that. Attack the German power grid. Now, we had some attacks on the power grid here, but in North Carolina recently, right? And overthrow the German government, by the way. At least 25 others have been accused of an involvement in the plot. So there may be more arrests perhaps to come. The conspirators modeled this attack, which they had been planning since November of 2021, on the aborted attack by far-right supporters of former President Donald Trump on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th of that year. They were attacking the wrong Capitol, though. Of course, they should have been attacking here in the United States, and they just decided to do it locally instead. But and that is interesting because that's not necessarily the sovereign. I thought they were borrowing from sovereign citizens, so they've borrowed a different angle from Americans. But this isn't a local imitation of an American original, although it combines German ideas with U.S. influence. It's an intensely German group. rooted in a bizarre interpretation of German history. This confluence of the local and the global is characteristic of German right-wing extremism, it turns out, and it can produce unexpected results, as I've written before, for foreign policy. How do you like that? There's a linked article from the same author, same magazine. Where does this come from? Or when did this publish? This was from February of this year. The far right has turned East Germans against vaccines. That was the last entry in which the author here says that he revisited or earlier visited these same concepts. I think that's very interesting. Right. So within these global linkages, many conspiracy theories on the far left as well as the far right, he's both sidesing the Heinrichs, have been incorporated into the QAnon intellectual space, and German conspiracy theories are no exception in this case. So I guess that's interesting. The global linkages, many conspiracy theories on the far left as well as the far right. Is he saying that German wellness mommy bloggers are also looking to overthrow the government? Are they working with a different Heinrich? We don't know. Sounds like, quite honestly, I don't know. I don't have any proof to the contrary, but it feels like one of those garbage, both sides kind of things to, just in case you're not going to read any further because you're a right-wing conspirator, I'll just throw out this stock phrase that will make you continue to read. In this case, the conspirators are members of a disparate movement known as Reichsbürger, or Citizens of the Reich. This word can be plural or singular, by the way. That's interesting. So you don't say, here come 10 Reichsbürgers who are plotting, or 25 who are plotting to overthrow the government. Here are 25 Reichsbürger collectively plotting in their crenellated capital to overthrow the Bundestag. Weizmannsheil. Okay. Anyway, the Reich in this case is the second Reich. Remember this, that they don't think that there was a third one because the third Reich, as we understand it, was actually late Second Reich, I guess. Anyway, so it's the second one to them. The German Empire that stood from 1871 to 1918, though they think it continued on. The ideology behind this movement has been promoted since the 1970s, when the jurist and Holocaust denier, great jurist, Manfred R-O-E-D-E-R. We would, here in America, probably say, I don't know, Roeder, but they may say Reuter. I don't know how they pronounce that. R-O-E-D-E-R. Manfred Reuter spread it in an attempt to revive both National Socialism, bad, and pre-Nazi Imperial Germany, which was also not great. The group's basic idea is that the Federal Republic of Germany, the modern German government, does not exist. And yet everywhere I look on maps and globes, there is a Germany. But it maintains that the Third Reich, the Wilhelmine government's successor, this complex of ideas seems to elide the Weimar Republic, was never formally dissolved in 1945, and that the modern German government is a tool of the Allied occupation, which is still ongoing. I mean, we are there. This belief system thereby combines hidden nostalgia for the Third Reich, which has to remain hidden because it's nostalgia for the Third Reich, which sucked, with overt nostalgia for the Second. For instance, many Reichsbürger followers want Germany to return to its 1937 borders. That was mentioned earlier, and somebody in the interim gave me some explanation of why 37 and what it would actually mean, and I've already since lost track of it, I'm sorry to say, but how much time can we waste on this thing? And the answer is lots more, apparently. There is a powerful strain of anti-Semitism in it, which, that's going to happen when you're talking Third Reich, or really any Reich, I guess, probably. These people have been compared to American and Canadian sovereign citizens. Like sovereign citizens, they do not pay taxes, although that's probably going to be popular among any kind of citizen. And like sovereign citizens, they can be violent. Reichsbürger were responsible, it can be plural, were responsible for one murder, like parentheses, numeral 1, murder, and 9 in 2020. And that's not German for no murders. That's the number in English of 9, the numeral 9. So 10 murders to their credit. although they spaced them 4 years apart, like the Olympics. In a dark reflection of German society in general, this conspiracy theory is profoundly legalistic. Reichsbürger believe, see, plural, that the Republic is not a state but a private company founded in 1949 by the Allies, while the German Reich exists legally but without institutions. So the movement's followers have taken it upon themselves to form a provisional institutions. I was going to say a provisional government, but they just, plural, form provisional institutions. This pathological legalism, and you understand what the legalism is? We came in and we killed everybody from the Third Reich and conquered Germany and occupied it. And they're saying, but the war stopped. That's true. But that was our choice. We decided to stop fighting you. But what you didn't do was say, Simon says this is the end of the Third Reich. Simon says the current German government is hereby dissolved. You simply fought it defeated it militarily, occupied its territory, razed its buildings, executed its leaders who were still alive, and established a different government in its wake. And you didn't say, P.S., this is the end of the then current German government. So, we have one over you. It's still going. And if we decide to simply reorganize it, then we can, a number of things they could do. Fight you militarily, which you could always do. You really didn't need the framework of the Third Reich or Second Reich or any Reich at all to do it. You could just fight militarily and you'd probably lose, but whatever. This was their fantasy. Or they could sue in some sort of international court and say, because it was never actually dissolved and nobody said who was coming next in that government, then we're as good a bunch of choices as anybody. We gave everybody the opportunity to vote in our stupid fake election and nobody would do it except us. And lo and behold, we won. And so therefore we step in. And it's no dumber than, various other governments that have been established in the wake of the collapse or overthrow of a different one, quite honestly. But that's all it is them saying, well, technically you never terminated it, so that means we can simply step into these roles. And it's nonsensical, like I said, because even if they had terminated it, they could have said, well, you crossed your fingers when you terminated it, or you didn't ask us if it was okay to terminate it, or we have simply formed a Fourth Reich and we populate that and we claim to be the ministers for that. And we overthrow you. And if you have the guns and you win the revolution, you win. If you get defeated, you're defeated. But anyway, for some reason, they really wanted to cling to this stupid legalism. And for some people, for some crazy people, I suppose that makes a difference. Wait, you're talking about overthrowing the government. No, we're talking about reestablishing the government. This is very pro-German government. Just not the one you think is the German government. You were wrong about that. You were pre-wrong about that. The old government is still in existence, and all we have to do is put on their uniforms and step into their shoes, and then they have to recognize us because legal reasons. And for some people that says, oh, you know what? I can't really figure my way out of that puzzle. So, I'll go along with it. That's all that's going on here. Anyway, so in a dark reflection of German society in general, this conspiracy theory is profoundly legalistic. Reichsbürger believe that the Republic is not a state, but a company founded by the Allies, I guess. This pathological legalism appeals to people involved with Germany's ordinary legalism. Many members are former police officers, military officers, and civil servants, right? So for the people who say, I said step out of the vehicle, sir, that makes a lot more sense. Because they're worried. They say vehicle because they're worried that when they stop somebody and they say step out of your car and the person says it's a crossover sport utility vehicle, I don't have to step out. You said clip instead of magazine. Well, I said vehicle, and that's a vehicle, so get out. I guess this works for these guys. The people arrested on December 7th include a former member of the Bundestag, and the far-right AfD party, former East German State Security, those guys are always mentally with it, and former members of the German Special Forces. Anyway, an interesting motley collection. And by the way, if you were part of East German state security, you were part of the Soviet bloc, which the Soviets are as illegitimate in their occupation of Eastern Germany as anybody else, but never mind. Logic means nothing to anybody. They also included several German nobles. Now we get to the Heinrichs, including one of the ringleaders, Heinrich the 13th rather, Prinz Reuss du Kostritz. I guess. I don't know. K-O with the umlaut. Kostritz. Anyway, here's the part. He is a minor noble, a very minor one. He is a prince, but the German states were once almost as thick with princes as Saudi Arabia, although for very different reasons. His princely status does not mean that he is related to the monarchy of the former empire, the family of the former Kaiser. It means that his family used to head principalities. That's what makes you a prince, right? The Kaiser's family is the Hohenzollerns. This Heinrich is a Reuss Kostritz, though U.S. papers have apparently, mistaken him for a Reuss Greiz, Greiz. I don't know, maybe that's Greiz, right? And I don't know how they pronounce their Z's. But anyway, that is a branch of this multi-partiate family that ended legally in 1918 when its last head abdicated. So he actually turned out the lights on the way out on that. And so I guess that's good enough maybe for the legalists in what are we calling this again? Reichsbürger. But anyway, so that's pretty interesting. So one, he's not a Hohenzollern. He's not related to the Kaiser. He's not even related to the branch of the Reuss family that was actually the prince of this principality back in the day. He's a lesser branch of it. So, we're talking about you know how it is. The firstborn son typically inherits the land and the title. So what happens to the third? Well, he's still got that name, but he marries off to somebody else and he moves somewhere else and tries to make a life for himself. And all the kids still have that last name, Reuss, but they're not the ones that have rights to the land and the palace and the principality. They just are a lesser branch of this family, which was not even a branch at all of the Hohenzollern family that was the Kaiser. It's just, he's like, I don't know, I was a prince, so I guess since there's nobody else around to turn the lights back on, I guess it could be me. Well, it can't, and you're crazy. So anyway, this Heinrich is a Reuss Kostritz, although U.S. papers have apparently mistaken him for a Reuss Greiz, a branch of this family that ended legally in 1918 when its last head abdicated. As with the vast majority of German nobles, even the word aristocratic is pushing it. I think this is an interesting angle to add to all of this. What has been keeping former East German state security, members of the far-right AfD party, monarchists without a monarch, fascists inside the German special forces, anti-vaccine activists, and believers in the QAnon conspiracy theory together? Well, one element is the unique politics of East Germany. The House of Reuss, in all 8 of its parts, by the way, is Thuringian, and East German aristocrats felt betrayed after the reunification of Germany in 1990. They had hoped that reunification would mean a restoration of their status and their property, much of which was seized by East Germany's communist government. That this did not happen radicalized many of them, just as East Germans more generally felt betrayed by the reunification. Why they thought that reunification with Western Germany would mean the restoration of the monarchy or their lands under the monarchy, I have no idea, but, they wanted it. So there you go. Just as Cuban exiles in Florida who are hardcore Republicans always thought that by backing Republican administrations here in the United States, they would be backing the plans to invade Cuba, overthrow the Castro government, and then they would be given back their lands and properties in Cuba. That was always the idea. And of course, look, that never came to fruition. They even tried an invasion of Cuba and it didn't work. And there are no plans to go back to it, no matter how many times you vote Republican. So I guess you could give up on that at some point. But in the meantime, they continue to vote that way, which is always interesting. That came up the other day. I was thinking about it as we were thinking about the differences between the various Latino populations in the United States and how they vote. But that the Cuban exile population in Florida, anyway, remains very heavily Republican. And I always thought that was kind of odd. I understand the dynamics that originally they thought they were going to back the party in the United States most likely to go through with an invasion of Cuba to overthrow Castro. As it turns out, it was a Democratic administration that gave the final go-ahead on that disaster. But I always thought it was interesting because to the extent that Republicans ever, really backed overthrowing Castro and restoring property rights for all of these Cuban exiles, the idea was to get rid of the Cubans, like send them back to Cuba. At the time you wanted that very badly, and perhaps you continue to think you want that. But just in case you had any illusions that Republicans liked you, and supported you and were happy to have you around, it was, they were willing to make use of you for Watergate break-ins. But in the meantime, all they really wanted was something that I want to trigger the event that makes all the Cubans in Florida pack up and leave and go back to Cuba, which has been Republican immigration policy since forever. And it's really difficult to understand why they like it so much. But, there's weird dynamics. And then, of course, there's the New Jersey Cuban population, the second largest Cuban exile population in the United States. And they're very heavily Democratic. And, I don't think the reasons are, who knows? There's a whole show we could do in explaining that. But we're in the middle of explaining Germany. There was the Eastern Radical Fringe and has been in Germany, and has also been shifting as it incorporates concepts from the global far right. Not surprising. In a rapid move away from 70 years of East German history, AfD adopted an anti-vaccine stance in late 2021 under the influence of the Querdenker movement. I don't know how that's pronounced. Querdenker. Querdenker movement, and I wonder if that has anything to do with QAnon. I don't know. And far-right groups in the United States. The worldwide far right may claim that it is for those left behind, okay, I got you. The worldwide far right may claim that it is for those left behind by globalism, that it is anti-United States, and that it is anti-European Union as well. But right-wing extremists also imagine themselves as participants in a global struggle against a global enemy. I think that has always been kind of a weird contradiction in terms here in the United States as well, right? That we are going to conspire with the Russians and the Hungarians and maybe some Chinese people as well to own the globalists, as Steve Bannon would have it, right? Fighting against globalism with a global movement against globalism. Never made any sense, but there you have it. And yet, the Reichsbürger movement remains intensely German. Linda Schlegel, writing for the European Eye on Radicalization, describes the movement's fixation on the, I'm not going to use the French, the end of the century German Empire as a form of displacement. They're using the French terminology for that, and I have no idea how you would pronounce it. So, fin de siècle, I guess. I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, it is based on the wish to display patriotism overtly, which many Germans still feel is taboo. I can understand that. Patriotism for the 19th century, though, is safe, since National Socialism remains harmlessly in the future, in the 19th century anyway, as long as you ignore what Manfred Roeder believed. In this interpretation, Reichsbürger are yet another expression of the German attempt to come to grips with the historical trauma, not only of having suffered evil, which can be expressed, but of having done it, which cannot. That is very interesting, psychologically speaking. In this context, the December 7th conspirators' belief is expressed in the official government statement made on their arrest are fascinating. Like their QAnon cousins, this group believes that Germany is currently governed by members of a so-called deep state. That's right, which is their responsibility to fight against as part of a network of American-inflected domestic defense cells. In German, they were described with the same word that is used to translate to Homeland Security. Isn't that very interesting? But in another torturous circle in Germany's agonizing attempt to put its past finally behind it, this group also believes that the deep state is opposed by the Alliance, a technically superior secret society of governments, intelligence services, and militaries of different states, including the Russian Federation and the United States of America. Yikes. They're really standing against some tall odds, don't you think? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's more, believe it or not. I really do want to get through this. But by the way, yes, some more input thanks to John Shiflett, who's been following along, making excellent use, I think, of the KITM hashtag on Mastodon. By the way, I want to thank you for doing that and joining Mighty OCD in doing that. And letting me know that regarding the meaning of the word crenellated, from Britannica.com's entry for battlement, the parapet of a wall consisting of alternating low portions known as crenelles or crenelles, hence crenellated walls with battlements, and high portions called, anyone know? That's interesting. So basically, the high portions and low portions, what you and I know as that castle-y looking stuff up at the top of the castle, like the stuff that goes up and down, right? Well, as it turns out, the low part is called, what you and I call the low part of the castle-y stuff on the top of a castle is crenelles, like crannies, nooks and crannies, right? And the top is not called nooks, even though the castle-y looking part on a chessboard is called a rook, but they are called merlons, not merlins, like the guy, the magician from Arthurian England, but merlons, Merlons. So nodes and antinodes, if you're just making a wave out of it, but merlons and crenelles. Now, why is it not merlinated? I don't know. It just isn't. It's crenellated. So there you go. This is important stuff to know for pieces of things that are obsolete or that nobody cares what they're called anymore, like the fact that there is a name for the little indentation on people's upper lips, right? The little groove in the middle there, which I learned at one point was called, I think, is that the philtrum? Yeah. And then, of course, I learned about the tissue connecting the bottom of the tongue, the frenulum. Who cares? The stuff that's there. The high parts and low parts, the castle-y stuff. That's it. Crenelles and merlons. Battlements, of course, were devised in order that warriors might be protected by the merlons and yet be able to discharge arrows or other missiles through the crenelles. Other missiles including, I guess, cauldrons of boiling oil as well. So there you go. The high parts and low parts of the castle-y looking crap at the top of a castle. There you go. That's what makes it castle-y looking. They're on castles. You can crenulate anything, I suppose. Anyway, I'm going to go crenulate the house once we're done with all this, because you never know when we'll be invaded by Reichsbürger, which is plural. Okay. Or can be. Where were we? Oh, yes, right. So there was the weird thing that German militias, essentially, when they get together and they practice shooting with the weapons stored in the bottom of the Weidmannsheim hunting lodge, they call themselves not militias, but Homeland Security, which is interesting. So anyway, like they said, in another torturous circle, they decided that there's a deep state, and the deep state is also, strangely enough, opposed by the Alliance, a technically superior secret society of governments, intelligence services, and militaries of different states, including Russia and the United States. The intervention of this alliance is imminent. They're going to step in and put down this rebellion because, after all, they are already in Germany. And at least part of it is the United States certainly occupies military bases there. This conspiratorial group, therefore, has awaited liberation by the United States and Russia, which it believes is their responsibility to aid. I don't even really understand. Now, this is getting crazy. We're supposed to be on their side, and we're going to announce that the current government of Germany was a creation of our own, and you're no longer bound by it, and we recognize the new Reichsbürger to step in and take over. Is that what they're thinking? The conspiratorial group has awaited liberation by the United States, which occupies them now, and Russia, which used to, which it believes it is their responsibility to aid. This liberation, I guess, is what they're supposed to aid. The group was supposed to form a military transitional government that should negotiate the new state order in Germany with the victorious Allied powers of World War II. In addition to having a Russian lover, Heinrich XIII had already made contact with a Russian individual for this purpose. So it's interesting that they even include the Russian lover. We were originally saying, maybe the fact that a Russian individual was arrested in this sweep isn't indicative of any real connection to Russian collaborators, but just happens to be that he's got a Russian paramour, I think was the word we used for it the other day. But I don't know. These Russian paramours tend to be planted more than, growing out of happenstance. And it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case here too. And in the way they put it, in addition to having a Russian lover, who may or may not have been the one who encouraged him to go and contact somebody in the Russian embassy, consulate, whatever. For all we know, this paramour encourages this crazy idea in Heinrich XIII that there's the deep state and da-da-da. Anyway, so Heinrich already made contact with a Russian individual for this purpose. That is to say, this little group has been role-playing the formation of a non-democratic German social order to capitulate at its head. Is this not Freud's return of the repressed? I don't know, but I'll take your word for it. These people sought to destroy the German constitutional democratic order in the name of an ideology developed originally by former Nazis, but also to negotiate a surrender agreement once again with the United States and Russia. And this time get it right. Even German visions of victory turn into compulsive repetitions of defeat. I think that's a very interesting way of closing it out. What a wild situation. By the way, if you want to know a little bit more about Lucian Staiano Daniels, the writer of this piece, more than just that he's a scholar of 17th century military history, you can learn that he was also most recently a Dan David Prize Fellow at Tel Aviv University. He is finishing a book on the historical social anthropology of early 17th century common soldiers. I know you're waiting eagerly for that to come out in paperback. His most recent academic article was Masters in the Things of War, Rethinking Military Justice During the 30 Years' War. And it's time to rethink military justice specifically. This is a very niche set of knowledge here. All right. So I don't know. I found that equally fascinating because of how dumb it all is. But we have so many dumb things here in the United States that we should turn our attention to that, gosh, who knows whether we'll get through all of it. All right. Let's see. Maybe we'll reserve more in-depth looks at the texts for later in the week, because that could easily consume the rest of the show, and instead turn to a few other interesting stories. Here's one. Here it is. What do you think? Pretty good, right? It's from Rolling Stone, and that's always good news. A weird story reviving the Russia thing one more time, I guess, from the December, well, I don't know, published on December 13th, right? And our author here, Adam Ronsley, under the weird headline, Russian trolls made fake Kid Rock fan accounts and fooled Donald Trump Jr. Not hard to do. Donald Trump Jr., very dumb individual. The former president's son reposted a conspiracy theory on ivermectin and oil supplies from Kid Rock official. Well, but I mean, how could it not be Kid Rock? It says Kid Rock official. Well, the account was a Russian troll trying to meddle in the U.S. election. And now we have to figure out which election was it they were trying to meddle in. Russian trolls are taking advantage of the free-for-all on far-right social media apps to spread pro-Kremlin propaganda. And they were particularly successful when impersonating fans of MAGA musician Kid Rock. Those conclusions are from a new report by the social media tracking firm Graphica and Stanford University's Internet Observatory. The researchers traced at least 35 accounts on the right-wing social apps to the Newsroom for American and European-based citizens. And I don't even know whether they mean based in the sense that you and I understand, like these are people who live in Europe and America, or are they based citizens in the weird way that kids refer to themselves as being? I don't even know what the terminology, the slang terminology for based actually means. I just see it a lot in right-wing and MAGA crowds where they call themselves based this or that. And I don't know, my kids use it for something completely different, and I don't even know what we're talking about here. But anyway, here's what you really need to know about this Newsroom for American and European-Based Citizens, or NAEBC. It's a phony news organization linked to Russia's troll factory. What more do you want to know? The fake accounts focused on ginning up support for failed Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake. So this election, they were trying to meddle in, attacking Democratic Senate candidates and pushing bizarre conspiracy theories about Ukraine and the bankrupt cryptocurrency exchange FTX, among other topics. And I think we're all open to conspiracy theories about that. Bring them on. I want to hear them. By the way, on the topic of Ukraine, I really do feel like I should briefly detour to mention Patrick Snyder mentioning on the KITM hashtag on Twitter. And Patrick, come on over to Mastodon and use the hashtag there. I hate to keep giving Twitter business by checking this thing, but I don't want to miss what you have to say. He had sent on here the tweet of Paul Massaro. Paul Massaro, well, I don't know. He's got a blue check mark, but what does that mean? Anything these days? But he points out that Twitter has deplatformed someone. Are you ready for who? They deplatformed Ukraine. This needs to be fixed immediately. He tweets, I'm sure, fairly uselessly to Elon Musk and Twitter support. And yeah, that's pretty crazy, like to deplatform Ukraine, whatever that means, in the middle, of course, their conflict with Russia. And they've made such tremendous and advantageous use of Twitter and social media in general to support their cause and to communicate with one another and coordinate their counteroffensives against the Russians. So this is really no time for that. But just thought I would make note of that without knowing a great deal about exactly what it means. Let me jump back now to the Rolling Stone article. Oh, yes, right. So researchers found Russian-linked fake accounts. I can't believe it. Posing as authentic American conservatives, cross-posting content to personas on Truth Social, Gab, and Getter. While right-wing social platforms like Gab and Parler have previously played host to Russian influence operations, the report marks the first documented case of Russian meddling on Truth Social, the social media app founded by Trump. You wouldn't think that they would be hesitant to move in there, but I guess possibly, maybe they might be saying, well, maybe we should have hands off there and let it be pure Trumpism, because then we don't really have to influence things on Trump Social. But there's maybe an indication of like, well, no, we should influence everything we can. And the fact that it would be easier for us to do on Truth Social just means it's that much more imperative that we go and do it. The 35 trolls amassed an audience of approximately 33,000 unique followers spread across Gab, Getter, and Truth Social. The network's memes and talking points mostly failed to recapture the large audiences they enjoyed during the 2016 presidential election, but a few, particularly those impersonating Kid Rock, a favorite target of Russian trolls, apparently for some reason, outperformed their troll persona colleagues. One of the trolls, Kid Rock Official, created a fake Kid Rock fan account that even scored a repost from Donald Trump Jr. when the former president's son, a friend of the real Kid Rock, who, if there really is one, shared it with more than 6 million Instagram followers. After screenshotting the troll's post, a memed conspiracy theory about gas prices and the bogus COVID cure ivermectin, originally posted on Getter, and putting it up on Instagram, Trump Jr. commented simply, "Yup," because he's very smart. Researchers linked the bogus official fan account on Getter to Russia's troll factory when they discovered an identical account on Gab, first identified by the FBI as run by Russia's Internet Research Agency in 2020, had resurfaced under the same handle to post the same content as its Getter twin. They're not hiding it very well. The network engaged in a deliberate effort to capitalize on public concerns about foreign interference in the U.S. elections, according to Graphica and Stanford researchers. Shortly before the midterm elections, accounts in the networks sarcastically identified themselves as Russian trolls, just as Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Russian oligarch behind the Internet Research Agency, was trying to raise his own profile within Russia with public admissions that his troll farm was behind the meddling in U.S. politics. The trolls stuck to themes familiar to previous Russian influence operations, including support for fringe or far-right candidates. The trolls backed Kari Lake, the Trump-backed failed Republican candidate for governor, creating a war room account for Lake that has since pivoted to echoing bogus voter fraud claims in the wake of her defeat. In addition to hyping Lake, the trolls also attacked Democratic Senate candidates in battleground states such as Raphael Warnock in Georgia and John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. Very successfully, obviously. Aside from domestic politics, researchers found the troll network also spread lies about Ukraine and its efforts to fend off Russia's aggression. The accounts found by the researchers pounced on a bizarre but popular right-wing conspiracy theory that FTX, this is involved in Ukraine somehow, FTX, the cryptocurrency exchange that recently went bankrupt, was somehow secretly funneling money to Ukraine to give to Democratic politicians. The meme, stolen from authentic American fever swamps, like with real authentic frontier gibberish, illustrates how even on familiar and important subjects like Moscow's war on Ukraine, the trolls were often trying to catch up with the American fringe rather than directing it. The American fringe is very good at inventing this stuff for itself. The tactics are exactly what we've come to expect from these actors since 2016. They use fake personas to imitate, infiltrate, and attempt to influence a specific online community. Tyler Williams, director of investigations at Graphica, tells Rolling Stone, these personas then coordinate across multiple platforms to amplify division and exacerbate existing tensions. This is precisely the behavior that gets them caught on Facebook and YouTube, but on alt-tech platforms, they appear to enjoy relatively free reign. Gab, Getter, and now soon Twitter. This operation doesn't appear to have evolved much beyond efforts we exposed by the same actors in 2020 and 2021. In terms of influence or impact, they mostly scream into an echo chamber on the fringes of the online conversation, with sporadic moments of breakout. Despite public claims to the contrary by the actors themselves, we consistently see them struggle to achieve sustainable reach, Williams added. Representatives for Truth Social, Kid Rock, and Donald Trump Jr. did not immediately respond to questions from Rolling Stone. In an email, Gab founder Andrew Torba said that his company prohibits illegal content. So there you go. And cited a November 30th post in which he claimed to have removed an unspecified foreign state actor botnet operating on Gab. If we had received notification from law enforcement that the account you mentioned was involved in illegal activity, we would have investigated and taken action, Torba wrote. We do not care what Graphica has to say on the matter. Jason Miller, Getter's CEO, said in a statement that the company takes a robust and proactive approach to moderation and removed all Russia Today accounts earlier this year for violating its terms of service. Our platform always complies with local law enforcement authorities and has been repeatedly praised for its approach to moderation by third parties such as Bot Sentinel CEO Christopher Bozzi. Shortly after publication, the Kid Rock account on Getter disappeared. Getter did not respond to questions about whether or not it had removed the account. Stanford and Graphica researchers were able to link the accounts in their reports to Russia's troll factory thanks to a lack of moderation on the right-wing apps and even sloppier operational security by the trolls themselves. In 2020, the FBI identified accounts associated with NAEBC as fakes operated by the St. Petersburg-based Internet Research Agency, and a subsequent investigation by Meta, that's Facebook, attributed accounts in the networks to individuals associated with past activity by the Russian Internet Research Agency. After Reuters blew the cover of the Russian-linked accounts on Gab, the operators behind them changed their account usernames and rebranded, surfacing to spread propaganda as renamed sock puppets. Graphica and Stanford could link other accounts to the same network as the rebranded Gab accounts through shared behavioral patterns, including the practice of sharing the same unique content at the same time, telltale grammatical mistakes common among native Russian speakers, and reused persona handles from previously attributed Russian sock puppet accounts. In one particularly embarrassing case, the trolls mistakenly included a Twitter screenshot that showed the app offering to translate the tweet into Russian, betraying the poster's default language on the app. All right, so now you're sort of up to speed on that angle of things. Just thought that was an interesting story we have to throw in there. Let me also throw in this continuing problem as it's described in the Daily Beast here by A.J. McDougall. Twitter's ex-safety head now has to flee his home after Musk's child sexualization smears, according to this report. This real problematic if you think there's anything at all still redeeming about Elon Musk, the person. Yoel Roth, Twitter's former head of trust and safety, the person who used to make sure, to the extent practicable, that activity on Twitter wasn't responsible for driving people out of their homes due to death threats, has now been driven out of his home by death threats. Well, he left his home over threats stirred up by Elon Musk's targeted smear campaign against him in recent days, CNN reported Monday, citing a source close to the matter. Who are these sources? Roth's departure from his home comes just days after Musk falsely implied that Roth, who is gay, had advocated for the sexualization of children in the past. In other words, the old play of, well, he's a pedophile, he's a groomer. And apparently that's at least working to well enough to make people lodge death threats against him that have driven him from his home. On Saturday, Musk shared an excerpt from Roth's 300-page 2016 PhD dissertation on Grindr, titled Gay Data. Alongside the snippet in which Roth suggested that safety strategies should be crafted to protect queer youth who choose to use the app, Grindr, Musk wrote, well, looks like Yoel is arguing in favor of children being able to access adult internet services in his PhD thesis. Okay, and you see what he's doing is he's sort of I don't know, but it appears that he's distorting the issue or the part of the PhD dissertation in which this guy Yoel Roth says, well, look, if gay youth are going to use Grindr to try and find one another, maybe we should build in some sort of a tool that protects them from predators on the site. Although I don't know how really, the whole thing is kind of geared towards meetups. So it seems like it's very difficult, but basically he's saying they're going to try and use it because they're interested in meeting up, but they want to try and meet up as safely as possible. Isn't there something we can do to help protect them? And for political/personal reasons, Musk is then saying, oh, he's trying to facilitate meetups on Grindr, which is really an adult app, because he wants to groom those kids using, that or some other app. And he's not trying to protect them. He's in fact trying to recruit them. And actually kind of the opposite of what he intended. But who's going to read a 300-page PhD dissertation on anything, much less on Grindr? I don't know. Anyway, deployment of the anti-LGBTQ plus trope that conflates queer identity with sympathy to pedophilia is a favorite smear tactic of far-right and conspiracy theorist circles, though Roth has been the target of fierce criticism, largely from Musk's disciples, since he quit Twitter in the early days of the billionaire's takeover. The threats against him escalated exponentially following Musk's baseless claim, CNN reported. And there's more about it in CNN's original reporting on it. I just happened to see that the Daily Beast picked up on it and carried the ball forward. So there's a linked article. You can read more about it at CNN. Just want that on the record because I think that's likely to get worse and expand in the days to come. Okay, let's see. Other things that we might be able to squeeze in a few minutes before we cast off for the day. Will this fit in there? No, I don't think so. Probably not. A 12-minute read is the estimation. And we don't have that kind of time. But perhaps we can save this for another day. But perhaps clarifying what's going on in the fusion world now that we've had our announcement. I didn't see what the Department of Energy had to say about it. So maybe we can check in with that later in the week as well. Let's see. Other things that we might be able to squeeze in. Probably nothing, quite honestly, because we're getting pretty damn close to the end of today's show. Although some very interesting other items of news floating around. It's going to be an interesting Friday, unless, of course, we spend the whole thing on the Mark Meadows texts, which is an interesting possibility. I'll throw this one in. This has nothing to do with anything, but I thought this was kind of interesting. Could be saved for a Friday. How about this? My AI will talk to your AI as Do Not Pay joins the GPT-3 fray. And I've been seeing more on Mastodon about artificial intelligence and this GPT. I don't even know what we're talking about here, but this was an interesting concept. So there's a place, a thing, an online platform, a legal claims platform, consumer rights and legal claims platform called Do Not Pay, which I assume is donotpay.com or something like it. Let me click through to it and see. I don't know. Well, it won't go through for whatever reason. Somebody's blocking something. Anyway, an interesting idea, an application of artificial intelligence chatbots, which is apparently all the rage, and that's what this GPT-3 thing is. And they are, I don't know, I've seen all sorts of people. They are generating written product. They're generating artificial intelligence generated artwork through this thing. It looks fascinating. They basically describe what they want to see done, and the artificial intelligence, based on God knows what, is generating this stuff for them. So now the Do Not Pay thing, which is for consumer rights. This is an interesting application. As corporations increasingly deploy AI chatbots to deal with consumer questions and complaints rather than actually assigning a person who needs to be paid to actually do something about it. They sort of fool you into thinking that you're talking to one or something like that. Anyway, but as other people have used consumer complaint lines or consumer retention programs at corporations to try and negotiate lower rates for themselves on everything from cable television to internet access to magazine subscriptions to what have you. These corporate retention programs have in mind the idea of, well, if we make some sort of concession to you at some point, we'll be able to keep you as a paying customer. But it's a rigmarole you have to go through, and it sometimes is more trouble than it's worth, especially if you're not actually talking to a person, but rather to an AI chatbot. But the do not pay people are set to make available to consumers AI chatbots of their own that you can deploy to have a chat with the corporate AI chatbot. The idea of which is they tell you the things that they need to do in order to trigger their AI bot to grant you a discount, and you program your AI chatbot to do the things it needs to do to say to the AI chatbot from the company whatever it takes to trigger that mechanism where they eventually offer you a discount. And so instead of wasting your time, an hour, half an hour, hour and a half, whatever it is, chatting with a chatbot to eventually get a 50% reduction in your cable bill, which is a great thing, you can save time and send your own chatbot to do the work for you and come back with a 50% discount on your cable bill. I don't know that they're actually advertising that they can get you that, but if you've ever dealt with a company that's offered you a discount to stay for service you're somehow otherwise dissatisfied with, then you know what it's like. And why waste your time doing it when you can have your own AI chatbot do it? I find that fascinating. I'm going to look into that and a number of other weird technological stories that I've been saving for the end of the week. But now, Justice Putnam takes the microphone for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
The usual collection of interesting stories from around the country and around the world, including Governor Kate Brown of Oregon, commuting the death sentences of everyone on death row in the state. Now serving life without possibility of parole for that matter. But an interesting and bold move among the stories he covers next.